Everybody, this is distinctly odd. Not only have I got a huge desk, but there's a moat. There's not a barricade over here. So, this is built, as if it were to resist the Labour borders from trying to seek power as we were following the elections of '96 or something. The Walkers as well, to throw eggs. It's all right. I've spoken to Simon. We will have the option, and we can discuss this. We will have the option of possibly, or certainly using the committee room as an alternative. I'll leave that in the air.
Chair, I was thinking about this actually on the way here because we humble it SNI. We have CR1, don't we? And I was thinking what a grand room you have here. And I was thinking about, is there anything tonight, how far away from us you're going to be and whether you'll feel comfortable about this. And I thought, why is it Councillor Shepherd gets the committee chamber and I get the committee room?
Well, as you know, I always sit down there, and I like to sit down there in an appropriate close environment. So, all right, we may experiment.
Officer, smaller target.
Right, may I sign the minutes of the 2nd of April meeting? Somebody please.
Chair, please note that I did make my apologies for not attending the meeting, but it's not reflected in the minutes.
Okay, we will so record.
I wouldn't like anybody, Chair, to think I haven't shown up and I haven't said my apologies.
Okay, of course.
Thank you.
Apologies today, Richard August sent me his news here. Right, it is convention, on no particular reason, convention that we appoint our own vice chairman. Do I have a nomination? Do I have a self-nomination? You wish to nominate yourself?
Oh, look at me. Well, I shall continue if everybody wishes me to, Chairman.
Do I have any other nominations? Right, I take it that is it agreed by the committee?
Agreed.
Thank you. Annual audit review.
Chairman, do you think we could do members' interest as well?
Oh yes, members' interest.
Well, actually there are.
All right, do give me a member's interest.
Well, I ought to be fair that I'm the chairman of the task panel for the corporate complaints task panel on item 7.
And Chair, I must, along the same lines, as Chair of SNI, we're going to be considering corporate complaints next week. So I will obviously keep an open mind tonight and next week, of course.
Okay.
We review
I pass no comment as to whether those are necessary declarations, but noted. Thank you very much.
But the second, sorry, Chair.
Right, annual review. This is
Thank you very much. I'd first like to apologise first. I got to provide 2 appendices, Appendix A and B, to the Committee Secretary, so I hope you have copies of those for this meeting. In terms of the scope of the information included in the annual audit review, it remains unchanged and is very much guided by the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards, which have been in place for the last 2 years. The review is broken down into 2 main areas. Looks at the internal audit service, the delivery of the plan, performance and compliance with the audit standards, and any service enhancements made during the financial year. The second part of the report provides my annual audit opinion for the year and highlights any significant issues arising from the work undertaken. So in terms of the completion of the audit plan, despite some deviation of resources away from audits to deal with investigations on behalf of management, we have managed to complete the majority of the planned work. If you could take a look at Appendix A, you will see from that provides details of all the audit work completed during the year and the assurance opinions given for each audit where it has been appropriate to do so. Of the 4 audits that have not been completed during the year, these are shown on the appendix as deferred. I'll just run through those 4. That's application of project management methodology on the second page, running down to planning obligations and community infrastructure levy, and the reasons for the postponement of that particular audit, and then to IT audits on network controls and file/PC controls. These are the same 4 audits that I reported to this committee in January, but all have subsequently been included in the current audit plan, which was approved by this committee in April. Looking at the indicators used to measure our performance, you will see the results for these are contained in the table on page 10, paragraph 4.3. Despite a difficult year resource-wise and changes in staffing, you will see that we have achieved nearly all the targets set. From my perspective, this provides a very good indication that the service has been effectively managed during the year, and any resource issues have been appropriately dealt with. However, it is the last indicator on that list which is most important to me. This provides me with a good indication as to how the service is perceived to be performing from a perspective of our customers. And the responses tell me that we are appreciated and add value, that we hugely contribute to the control environment, and that ultimately we're providing an effective service to the council. Moving on to the second of the appendices, Appendix B. This lists both the non-conformances and also progress towards achievement of the actions which were identified from those members that are new on the committee from an assessment that I undertook against the public sector internal audit standards over 18 months ago. From that assessment, you will notice that the completed actions for those, which are shaded in grey, show that most of those actions have been satisfactorily completed now. The outstanding actions include an assessment of the fraud risk, which is currently being completed as part of our work on developing a counter-fraud strategy for the council, and that will be discussed later in the committee agenda. And also preparations early next year for an external assessment of the service, which is a requirement of the public sector internal audit standards. Moving on to the second part of the report, as the report states in section 5, this is where I provide my annual audit opinion and draw attention to any significant control, risk or governance issues which are particularly relevant to this committee. Based upon the work undertaken and summarised in Appendix A, it is my annual audit opinion for 2014-15 that is one of substantial assurance, which reflects the significant progress made by management in the past few years to put in place an effective control environment and continuously develop and report on both risk management and governance. As you can see from the table in paragraph 5.5, on page 12, the assurance indicator, the ratio one, full, substantial to limited minimal ratio, has for the third year running passed the target set by this committee, the year-end position being at 90 to 10 on that ratio basis. But even more significant though is the year-end position for the completion of recommendations classed as high priority, hitting the 100% mark and passing the target for the first time since monitoring began. The attention of management, together with the close monitoring undertaken by the Risk Management Group, has certainly helped in achieving this outcome, which should be applauded. However, there is a caveat to that. As I say in paragraph 5.7, care needs to be taken in not placing too much emphasis on this particular indicator in future, given the few recommendations at this level which are made. For instance, the current register only contains 5 high priority recommendations, which isn't an issue in itself, but it's certainly reflective of the strong control environment. In terms of the significant issues to bring to the attention of the committee, yes.
So, before, could we take this in sort of bite-sized chunks?
Yeah.
And I possibly should have stopped at the end of 4, but taking a pause there for any questions so far on sections 4 and 5. Quickie to start off by me, 411.
Yeah.
Why do you actually say that these are the most notable improvements why these particular improvements?
We previously had sometimes a development of an audit manual or a procedure manual. This is under paragraph 4.11, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. The development of such a document can sometimes be within parts just be left on the shelf. We don't. We actively use this to guide us through the audit process. It doesn't tell us how to do an audit in a particular area, but the importance of it, whereas previously we were under the auspices of SIPFA, we significantly moved forward with the new public sector internal audit standards and the local government application note. So with that, one of the key requirements is to also document a quality assurance and improvement programme, which pretty much deals with the indicators here, our service plan, any internal quality measures that we have in place, and it's about bringing that all together. And it's certainly something, one of the key requirements that the external review that's for next year that they will be looking for. Without that, you wouldn't necessarily pass as a fit for purpose internal audit service.
Yeah. 5.6. I make this point at the annually, really for the benefit of new members, that we are sitting in an extraordinary position if you think of any other normal organisation, because in a normal organisation that is streamlined with management, senior management, the board, ordinary management, everybody doing their own job. The role in a business of audit is usually quite narrowly defined as to risk and as to financial regularities. In local government, we have the extraordinary situation of an audit manager looking both up and down at the effectiveness of management above him as well as below him. So when he says, as he does in 5.6, that management's responses to recommendations of internal audit have been positive and have resulted in recommendations being implemented, when he is in that way complimenting management, it really, in many ways, sounds very, very odd for a mid-ranking officer really to be asked to analyse the processes that are taking place throughout the organisation, including those above him, seniority scale. But that's what happens in local government, and indeed, it's an improving, pleasing aspect over the years that the two groups here of management and audit work together for the overall betterment of systems, which is what our job is, to look at how audit is doing this particular job.
Chairman, can I just make another point off the back of that, probably for the new members as well? I mean, it may look like over the last couple of years that, I'm sort of saying, management are doing this well, they're doing that well, and it may be that, we have this cosy relationship, and as you well know, over the period of time, we challenge them on lots of issues. And just looking back at the figures on these two assurance indicators, when the committee was first set up back in 2007-8, the assurance ratio for that 80-20 split was at 43-57. And similarly, the percentage of agreed recommendations that are categorised as high, the percentage against the target of 90% was 42%. So it's about that level of challenge from internal audit with our audit plan and the scope of audits that we deliver, but also that demonstrates to me the effectiveness of us, and also management in having to deal with, during that period, restructures, reorganisations, restructures, and service reduction in certain areas. So you can see how that progression has gone from those areas that to the current level.
Right, any other questions so far on this?
Oh, yes, if I could ask one question. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it says on 4.3 you've got 15% of variance against audits. Was that due to the shortfall of staff that you had last year? Is that now, are we now at the point where that won't be an issue going forward?
Yeah, this is a difficult one because over the course of a 3-year strategic plan, we look at it in terms of trying to do a scope across the whole council over 3 years. This is one of the ones that we've been. It's a judgment between doing an audit that adds value to the organisation, and with that, providing additional resource to it, over and on that the original that was allocated within the plan.
Yeah.
So it's a fine balance between 30% of the audits, or more in this case, trying to balance that with the resources available to deliver an added value audit rather than just going through the process of providing assurance. It's all about the product that you want to deliver, and that has, over the past, together with changes in staff, because sometimes that can have an effect in terms of the level of an audit that I would normally put against an audit maybe 7 days, and for a new auditor it may take them 9 days. So there is an element of that as well. But yes, that's pretty much what it is. It's about providing that added value to certain audits rather than just delivering an audit plan that tells management where things
It's a
are.
targeted deliverable.
Right, thank you. Yes,
If I could just say, I mean, both yourself and myself, we've had several interesting discussions with internal audit over the last year about various subjects, and things that come out of that, which is quite good.
Right, you're at 5.8.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So in terms of the significant issues to bring to your attention, there's only been one audit that's received a minimum assurance rating, and that's in respect of building control income. Details on that matter are throughout that paragraph there on page 13. Concerns were raised with management were in respect of income due, raised and received during an interim period of management from between January 14 and March 15, which was prior to the now formal shared service arrangement with Rugby, Warwick, and I think now Coventry. They're not yet. That interim arrangement during January 14 to March 15 was with Rugby Borough Council, and due to the difficulties outlined in the report, we wasn't able to evaluate the control environment in place, and due to the lack of a reconciliation process, this meant we were unable to obtain adequate assurance that all income due to the council has been accurately recorded, requested and or received. This has been left in the hands of management. The report's gone to senior management team on more than one occasion, and management have assured us that they are actively pursuing the matter with Rugby Borough Council.
Okay, 2 quickies on that. Is partnership working with other authorities, does that feature on the risk register as a generalised, generic factor, and does this particular partnership working with Rugby feature on the risk register?
Perhaps if I can help, Chairman. In terms of partnerships generally, then that features within the strategic risk register. Specific partnerships as part of the service delivery would feature within that service, the services on this register. If they were thought to be significant enough, then they would feed through and inform the strategic risk register.
Yes, I mean, there's inherent risk in doing anything with another authority trying to know how it's done. Okay, thank you.
With regards to the other audits of corporate significance highlighted in paragraph 5.9, and the up-to-date position on the one audit that was raised in last year's annual audit review, which is the one in 5.10, I'm pleased to report that satisfactory progress has been reached in each of these areas, and in particular IT project governance and management, which has been given a revised audit opinion of substantial assurance following a recent follow-up audit. Members should also gain confidence from internal audit's involvement on the risk management group and also on the IT steering group to ensure each of these areas is maintained and continued developed. And finally, from paragraph 5.11 onwards, you will see my ongoing monitoring of corporate risk management. This continues to show that management has appropriate arrangements in place, are applying those arrangements in accordance with the policy and guidance, and is continually looking to make improvements. It's for example, in the case of information risk. And that concludes my annual audit review, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Nick?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Under 5.10 and 5.9, when you talk about ICT, do you include data protection, digital and social media, web and the digital area? Because ICT, in its traditional definition, wouldn't include that.
Included in these particular areas is around the delivery of the ICT strategy. You can't detract away from the fact that ICT is about information in service areas. There is an element of that also. We've done previously work on information governance as well. Information security and handling goes hand in hand with the ICT, but these particular areas are focusing around delivery of the ICT strategy in particular. And also then the IT project governance and management is of that delivery of that strategy, which is helped by the IT steering group that was put together as well with the officer.
Chairman, if I might just add to that, there's a paper later on the agenda which looks at information management, and that will talk a little bit about information risk and how we deal with that. So,
is that separate to the ICT strategy, or is that an element of it?
It's separate to the ICT strategy. We have a separate information risk policy and some procedures that sit beneath that.
And given that that's a risk about information, where then would you incorporate something on what I might call messaging of the use of social media by the council, and who controls what's said on that, and how that is managed, moderated and controlled?
If I may, Chair, we do have social media policies and protocols. So beneath the information risk policy is the overriding information policy, and beneath that there are a number of practices and procedures, including social media protocols.
Thank you.
Any questions? We are invited to resolve that the annual audit review for last year and the control issues raised in the report be acknowledged in support of the Council's annual government statement. Agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Item 6, information management. So, this is yours.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The lack of discussion we've had sort of, in a way, sets the scene for this paper. I think for the benefit of committee, both existing and new members, just to give a bit of context to the papers in front of you. Previously, committee have received annually a report which was had a snappy title running along the lines of freedom of information, data protection, blah 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 blah, and was under a banner of issues. What we've tried to do is bring that together as an information management report, but also include a section around information security, and that in turn will feed the annual government statement, which is later on the agenda this evening. So that's just a bit of background to the paper in front of you. This committee's remit includes oversight of the way the council handles statutory request for information and its use of powers under the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act. The first part of the report talks about information requests and how we deal with that. So section 4.1 talks about the Freedom of Information Act, and that's requests to the Council for information under that particular act. During 14-15, our total number of requests was slightly up on the previous year, at 839. The bulk of the requests are freedom of information, 70%, but it also includes environmental information requests, which was around 30% of the information requests over the past 12 months, which is consistent with the previous year. Most of the environmental information requests, and I'm going to jump, if you don't mind, to section 4.3, are around property issues and including some land charges issues. So essentially, I think in terms of the way we deal with the requests, they're managed alongside the freedom of information requests. There are some stats attached on page 27, which sets out month by month over the past 3 years the different types of requests that we receive. And you'll see that the summary position is the number of requests is starting to plateau. We have seen steady increase from year to year, but it is starting to plateau over the last 12 months. If I can take you back then to paragraph 4.1.1, which is on page 20, freedom of information reviews, where we receive requests for information which we feel don't fit within the regulation, we are able to refuse those requests. And there is a review process, and during the course of the year, we had 2 requests for reviews, and the details of those are set out in paragraph 4.1.1, but essentially no further action was taken. We reviewed what we did, felt it was appropriate, and reported that back. There is a further opportunity for the requester to seek a review by the Information Commissioner, but that option was not taken up by the information requesters in those cases.
Who makes the initial decision and who does the review?
The Council's Information Officer will make the initial decision, and then it's reviewed with the Data Protection Officer if there is a challenge to that information. Yeah, and it depends on the complexity. I mean, if it is a complex issue, we might seek legal advice as well. Okay, if I could then take you to 4.2, we are required under the Code of Recommended Practice on Data Transparency to produce various data sets, and I can report that we have produced those data sets, and they are available on the Council's website. Then moving on to the Data Protection Act on 4.4, this deals with, in particular, subject access requests for information or requests for information about individuals who can come and challenge us on what information we hold on them. We deal with a small number of requests there, and you can see on top of page 22 the 23 data protection inquiries we dealt with during 14-15. The final sentence of that says this represents a 76% increase over 13-14 when the Council received 14 data protection inquiries. I'm not sure that maths quite adds up actually, but we have seen an increase in those requests, but the numbers are relatively small. Okay, then moving on to compliance with the data protection policy and the reporting incidents under that policy. So in section 4.4.2, we have set out in the table the number of incidents reported during 14-15 and the comparison against 13-14. Now, what that may suggest is that we have seen an alarming increase in the number of breaches. Where we believe that has come from is actually a greater awareness through training and self-reporting of breaches. In themselves, the breaches are fairly minor, and we are self-reporting and investigating and setting actions in place where appropriate.
Can I ask a question, actually?
Yep.
On the community team third incident, could you just confirm whether or not the council has a policy that the computers auto-lock after a specified time?
I confirm that is the case.
And how long is the time?
It is 15 minutes. The screen will kill itself after 15 minutes.
Do you think that might be too long?
We have discussed this as part of the ICT steering group, and we felt that alongside raising awareness of the issue was appropriate. What we were trying to do was balance the frustration of shutting a screen down after 2 or 3 minutes with the practicalities of making sure it does shut off if somebody's away from the desk for 10 or 15 minutes.
Suggest that's too long.
Actually, Chairman, I think that's 15 minutes is too short, because sometimes when you're typing something out and it shuts the screen down and you lose whatever you've been writing if you haven't saved it. Because when you press send, it just automatically logs you out and you lose things that you're sending.
Well, it shouldn't close down while you're in active use of the machine. That's the first thing about mine does. I just live in a slightly different world under the MOD, and we work on a 2-minute shutdown. If you don't use your computer for 2 minutes, it shuts down. And you get used to it. It's not a problem. All you have to do is put your password back in. So I'm used to a 2-minute shutdown. And I recognise there's a degree of sensitivity to some information. But 15 minutes does feel a long time for a computer to be left where nothing's happening. If you walk away from it, as this individual did, 15 minutes, there's an awful lot you can do. And of course, once you're using the machine, it stays open and alive, doesn't it?
I mean, yes, you may come back on that, Chairman. I mean, you are able to shut it down manually, just by a Control-Alt-Delete and lock your screen. So if you know you're going to be away for 3 or 4 minutes, then you can do that. But the system automatically will lock your screen if there's been no action after 15 minutes. I think as I say, this issue was discussed at our ICT steering group, and the risk was recognised. However, we felt it was appropriate. I think the particular issue that's identified there was through a rogue employee who is no longer with us, so we felt it was an isolated incident.
I look forward to not seeing it then in the future.
That's all about
Very
training.
good. Move on. Any other questions? We are invited to...
So, Chairman,
We're not quite finished yet. You interrupted. Yes. That's problem though. Carry on. Nearly there.
4.4.3, overall
Yes.
compliance audits. We undertake audits, internal audits, separate from the internal auditing. Our information officer carries out some information audits, and 12 were completed during 14-15, and overall compliance was considered to be good. Moving on to Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act. These powers are very rarely used by the Council. In fact, we last used in 2010-11. However, we were visited during last year by the Office of the Surveillance Commissioner's Inspector, who had a look at our policies and tested us on our knowledge, and they were suitably satisfied, and in fact at the top of page 24 the Commissioner praised the Council's excellent policies and procedures and knowledgeable employees, and no RIPA authorisations are in force during that current time. 4.6, just a quick reference that our information officer works with a group of peers across the county that are sharing best practice and any concerns that arise. 4.7 takes us to information security, and perhaps unfortunate council will teach us off the roof, but this really covers covers the information risk elements, and is a new bit essentially to this paper that you're seeing. I am the Senior Information Risk Owner, CIRO, and in that role I have a responsibility for writing a written judgment on the security of information, which goes into the annual governance statements. And just setting out in summary the issues I've considered, and that's allowed me to make a conclusion that the council is appropriately managing its information assets, and you'll see that within the annual governance statement later. So essentially that's the report. Conclusions: the overall trend of information requests continues to rise, but to a lesser degree than has done previously. The council is meeting its information management obligations consistently. There's always potential of risk of non-compliance. So with the introduction of compliance audits and any training and risk logs regularly reviewed and updated, any threats to the business assets are likely to be mitigated. And on that conclusion, committee are invited that the approach to information management be endorsed. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Yes. Chair, it's not a question, only a comment. On page 27, I see this table is starting to build up now over a period of time. Can we please request we have that table again, but obviously next year, but our next year's figures only 2, so we can start to ensure that we do get a long-term trend on the numbers. And I think Tony said about them plateauing out. We'll see further evidence of that perhaps next year. And I wonder if perhaps next year when we review this, we can start to look at any actions we can take to reduce some of those numbers, or anything we can do to help manage them. At least if they plateau, we'll know where we are. So really a recommendation for next year, Chair. Thank you.
Chairman, if I may just come back on the second part of the point, in terms of data presentation, that's fine, we'll assume that. I think in what we do to try and manage our information requests is by producing more and more data sets on the internet. I mean, we do have a data publication scheme which allows people to effectively self-serve information requests. And we do look at what comes in and try to add to that. So.
Thank you, Chair.
Just following that point, if I ring make what I would think is a request, and I'm told it's on page X of the internet, and I go away and I dispose of my inquiry by looking at that page, is that noted as a request?
No, if we signpost you to the information, then we don't count it as an FOI.
Right. Yes.
Can I ask one final question? Sorry to bring you back. When I was reading through the papers, I noticed on page 24, the data protection, of 76% of your employees have completed their e-learning module for this, and obviously you've got actions in place. Could you just cover off how that's going to be taken going forward? Is that part of their individual development plans?
Yes, it is. I mean, we have determined that the data protection e-learning module is mandatory, and it was introduced during the course of the year. So most people have now done it, 76% as you rightly pick out, and we will be working with the ones that haven't yet done it, so that will be done. Information provided from the system to service managers, and service managers will pick it up individually.
Is that the service manager's responsibility to make sure that the people are going to follow through?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry.
Right. We've done. No more questions. Thank you. We are asked to resolve.
Sorry, Chair. One final thing.
Yes.
I'll tell you, in terms of presentation on page 28, I'm sure that looks great, but I can't quite work it out in black and white. I wonder if it's, again, for next year, a better way of approaching the data.
Yeah, we always have this.
I'm sure we always have this.
The answer is look on your webpage.
Doesn't look any better on there either.
Yes.
You could, Chair, but I'd like to look at the pack that I have. That's the point.
I think if I could just make a quick comment, and perhaps Councillor Bunting can concur, or otherwise if you're looking at a colour version of that. In colour it doesn't really help you either. There are too many, there's too much information.
The two segments of the pie.
Yeah, so we may have to think about how we present that.
Yeah, I think pie charts have their place, but not with too much data perhaps.
Right. Can we agree to resolve per paragraph 2 that the approach to information management be endorsed? Thank you. Item 7, corporate complaints. Who's dealing with this? Maria's report.
I'll be presenting this, Chair.
Yes. Hello.
Hello. Good evening, Committee. I'll introduce myself. I'm Katie Jones. I'm the Customer Service Manager. You might not have seen me before. I'm here to present the corporate complaints report, which details the complaints that were received to the Council in 2014-15. It tells you the number of complaints, the stages of complaints, and also details our complaints policy for that year. During 2014-15, we were operating a 3-stage complaints process. So stage 1, which was service resolution, stage 2 is team resolution, and stage 3 is a management resolution. As you'll see in section 4.2, the process for 2015 has been reviewed and may subsequently be reviewed depending on the outcome of the S&I task panel next week. What did come out of the review from the work that I have been doing with the S&I task panel and specifically with Councillor Patchett was the presentation on how we present to corporate governance on the complaints that we receive, in line that we already receive an Ombudsman report as well. So we did a lot of work of trying to change the table and the presentation of how we report complaints so that there was some kind of line of sight between our complaints and how we record them and the complaints that we get from the Ombudsman. Although we could only do this where it was practically possible because some of the Ombudsman categories are slightly different to ours. So in 2014-15 there was a slight rise in complaints, but in total complaints it was only 14, and the actual number of stage 1 complaints there was less, so it shows that there was actually a rise in the escalation from stage 1 to stage 2. So in 14-15 there was 93% of our complaints, of which we had 1,310 were stage 1, 6% were stage 2, and only 1% went to stage 3. That's a difference from last 13-14, there was 95% at stage 1, 4% at stage 2 and 1% at stage 3. The complaints that we've mainly received, and the majority of the complaints that we do receive, are within the public space area, with 939, so 13 of 10 being within that area. I think that's it. Who's got a question?
If I may, Chair, ask a question. This area is still rising in complaints, and I think it's set to get actually a lot worse in public space, because if we look at recent events, particularly in Daventry, I only expect this area to keep growing, to be honest. I know that's not anything you can really control, and I know there are external factors on them. But is there more, because it's obviously the biggest area, is there a lot of emphasis in this area from your point of view, or is there any new changes that we should be aware of?
I mean, from my point of view, I know that there's a lot of work going on with working directly with the enterprise on looking at the issues that we are experiencing and identifying how that operationally we can reduce the number of complaints that we're receiving.
It's an issue that's on the partnership board, the Environmental Services Contract Partnership Board routinely. Been highlighted again, and I was actually checking with Katie today about the complaints on grass cutting in particular, because if you recall there have been issues like that in the past, given we've just come through another spring, and I'm pleased to say, and Katie can confirm, that the volume of complaints is dramatically lower. You have seen grass cutting. So it is a very live issue, and we do take it up and try to get the attitudes changed within the organisation, or more particularly with the contractor. And I would suggest to you that it's worth this year in terms of grass cutting.
I think to add to this, to put it into some context, we had over 11,000 interactions via the contact centre for public space, of your grass cutting, your bins, etc. So out of those, 11,000, there was 900 complaints. So it kind of puts a bit of context around it.
Chair.
I think, unless I'm missing something, and I do get a bit stuck on customer complaints, as anybody on SNI last time on the test. The data here, I know you've got the summary in terms of total number of complaints. I think it would be very interesting to understand year-on-year comparison by this level of granularity we have on page 33, so we can see by area what the changes were over a period of time. And that's comment number one I'd like to make. And the second one is, can we just confirm, if it gets to the final stage, we understand that's how many complaints have got to that level, but do we know at that point if it's satisfied, or does it then go on to the Ombudsman? That's how it works, isn't it? If they're dissatisfied, then that takes it out of our hands completely. Yeah. So whether they're satisfied at that point or not is regardless to us.
It can then go to the Ombudsman.
Because then go to the Ombudsman anyway if they're dissatisfied. So is there some, on this big table here, is there still something missing in terms of the final resolutions?
So, generally, if I may, what we tried to do, certainly what Katie and the team have tried to do, is to set out the information in a way that will make some sense when you get to see the Ombudsman figures. I think in the past this committee in particular has had concern that the categories weren't consistent with the Ombudsman reporting. So it's a new format. So to answer your first point, that's why there isn't historic data. The first time we've reported in this format. In respect of the cases that go on to the Ombudsman, you will receive a report at the next meeting. In fact, the letter, the Ombudsman annual letter has arrived with me today. So I'll be able to report on that next time around. What it does do is identify how many cases go to the Ombudsman and the outcome of those cases. And I can advise this committee, given representations that were made last time, we have seen an addition in information, detailed information from the Ombudsman, so we can actually track back to specific cases, which was part of the difficulty we were having previously. So the next stage is dealt with in the next report. It's unfortunately that it doesn't come quite soon enough to come into this committee. It will be reported next time.
If the Ombudsman's reporting system were such as to be able to be directly comparable with this, if it were, are we entitled to assume that of the 1,310 complaints here, all but 17 were resolved, and of those 17, we would expect to see some go to the Ombudsman and be resolved, or other. Some might drop away, but some, i.e. be resolved at the stage 3 stage. So we would expect to see, for example, on this sort of figures, maybe at, I don't know, 10, most go to the Ombudsman and be resolved by him.
If I might come back on that, Chairman, if only life was so simple. The Ombudsman...
Well, my 2 points there. I mean, the first point, we are entitled to assume that of the 1,310 complaints made, all but 17 were resolved.
Well, Chairman, if I may, one of the things that the task panel looked at through SNI was the fact that the complaints weren't recorded as being closed. So nobody's any idea whether any of them are satisfactorily resolved.
Oh, I see.
Or not.
Okay. Well, I mean, okay, that's taking one stage further, saying that just because it doesn't go to the next stage, it's not necessarily a result.
Sorry, Sue, if I can just come back on that. I think you're right to deduce that the number of complaints fall away. What we don't know is if we send a response to a complaint and the customer is silent, that they're accepting the case, they're not raising it to next time. So the assumption, therefore, reasonable assumption, is that the complaint is dealt with to the satisfaction. So we can't necessarily say that we've had, whatever the number is, come back and say, yes, I'm happy with your response.
No.
So
you wouldn't expect that.
And sorry, Chairman, if I can just go back to the other point in terms of the Ombudsman report. I can't remember the numbers that I've seen today, but they're closer to 17 or maybe even above 17 that the Ombudsman's dealt with. And one of the difficulties we have, and you will recall perhaps from the previous discussions of that particular paper, is that the Ombudsman, his language or her language is along the lines she would not normally accept complaints unless they've been through the council's complaints procedure. But there is an avenue there where complaints can be received directly by the Ombudsman. They're also at pains to tell us that we shouldn't be doing exactly what we're trying to do, which is compare their data with ours.
Thank you.
Chair, I think we had this last year. I think we had a rather flippant point that we should put in a complaint to the Ombudsman. And you can see that, I mean, from a very simple layperson's perspective, I've been looking for a table which basically said at what point the complaint stopped. And I think that's the assumption, because we had a discussion about SMI, about what is the definition of a complaint, classification and so on. To me, it was very straightforward. A complainant stops complaining. You mark them down and they stop complaining. So if they've stopped complaining at the third stage, that means you can basically assume they've been satisfied, right? So therefore, you would, I don't know if it's the alignment of the categories or it's the complexity here, but it strikes me there must be some way, at least at a basic level, of having a final column on, which said Ombudsman, and then you have a full picture on one sheet of paper. And finally, Chair, one other point. I think we've been talking about 17 complaints, but unless I've misunderstood this, it wasn't that 17 complaints got to the Ombudsman. 17 complaints got as far as stage 3, but then some may or may not have gone on to another stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The trick really, Chairman, is that the 17 complaints that the management have dealt with might well marry up with the 17 that went to the Ombudsman, but not necessarily.
Yes, well, the Ombudsman is looking at a longer, different period anyway.
Chairman, sorry, I risk of prolonging this. The Ombudsman report has provided another level of detail for the first time, which we haven't had a chance to look at. I haven't shared this with Katie yet, but it actually gives the details of reference number for each of the complaints, so we can track those back into our system. So we will hopefully be able to give a better analysis when we report that. I think the other point in response to Councillor Morgan is that at stage 3, there is no further stage with the council, so we don't know whether they're satisfied they've gone to the Ombudsman or not, because they don't come back to us. It is a final decision from the council.
No, that's interesting, Chair, because when they come back to us with the Ombudsman's view, then we must have some information about the original complaint, so we can cross-reference it back to the original complaint. So therefore, by definition, you could populate it back on the table by, complaint to Ombudsman, and just put the number in. I know there's more to it in terms of the learning and all the rest of it, but in terms of simple data representation, that would do the trick, wouldn't it?
Yes, for you, Chairman. I think we are now in a position to be able to do that based on the information hot off the press from the Ombudsman, which wasn't available at the time we put this paper together. So it's something that we'll look at and may be able to improve the reporting for
Yeah, I mean, that raises the question, do we normally expect a letter from the Ombudsman in June?
Yes, Chairman, we normally get one in June, but it's normally too late for this committee, as has been the case this time.
So we could readjust our cycle to put the complaints report to this committee in September, so we could do both at the same time.
Yes, we could, Chairman, and that's really in your gift or the committee's gift. I think
that
what
next
we...
year?
Chair, that makes perfect sense. We want a single document which tells us the story for each year.
Okay, let's do that next year. We'll try and coordinate it too. Right. So, no further questions on corporate complaints. Can we resolve that the effectiveness of the current complaints and feedback policy and associated complaint handling be endorsed? Yes, agree. Thank you. Breaches of procedure rules. Simon, is it yours?
Chairman, I'll lead off if I may. It's obviously a joint report with all those here as well as Chief Finance Officer. There was established members will know it's an annual report. New members, those who have seen. The Constitution has an obligation to report on breaches of the various procedure rules and regulations in that Constitution. Again, for the benefit of the members, I've actually highlighted what those various rules are of the Constitution, because I'm sure you won't have had a chance to read that wonderful document yet. So I'm sure you will. Usually those sorts of breaches will come through by internal audit, but what we're trying to identify for you fairly in the report on that first summary introduction is it's not going to capture all breaches, it's not trying to capture all breaches. I go on to explain why it's not actually necessary to capture all breaches for various reasons. There was the one event recorded on the register, which was the failure to raise a retrospective order, placed an order. No value, but it was still a failure, a breach in that sense. But there was nothing of significant concern, but a reminder was nonetheless given to the employee concerned. We don't need to change our general handling of such transactions, and therefore don't need to look at changing any of the procedure rules. Now, I go on then to explain about other activities that could be said to be breaches. If you just take the English definition of breach, a failure too. So there are illustrations, and we had one during the last year, where, for example, we had a strategy group member involved in scrutiny. It was Councillor Morgan, will recall. We dealt with that at council because there were no issues, frankly. It's not a problem for us.
Absolutely.
So we comment.
Yes, absolutely, Chair. Scrutiny weren't scrutinised and remember this properly. Probably resolved. Thank you.
But in officer terms as well, travel claims, some late submission causes a problem with an account, trying to administer that, doesn't raise any particular concerns, except I do illustrate in the report that some of these things can amount to a pattern, and it's when you get a pattern you start to need to do something. So we did issue a reminder during the year, and our team did issue a reminder with respect to travel claims, and the same practice will apply in future. There are things that we can spot that might individually have been insignificant, but together with getting concerned, we will issue a reminder to staff and members as appropriate. So that's what our approach is and what we try to do. I make a comment on page 37 about the system's not there to stifle, if you like. They're trying to accommodate, not trying to be absolutely rule-driven. So proportionality is very important in this. But I am conscious that even though we don't get many what suggest as breaches proper, that we are considering whether to align the report next time with those various rules in the Constitution. So you could look under Section X. It was that amount of breaches, a bit like the presentation points. So we might look at that. Although, as I say, there aren't many breaches in those other sections. It's the financial ones that are really of significance from a council perspective.
Chair, I think that would be an excellent idea. You could actually have a very simple table. The clause, yeah, I'd absolutely underline it with the nature of the issue.
That's what we
Can I say, what's the significance of what we're trying to report? Are we trying to report on everything or on a tolerance level, an impact level? Because I'm conscious that this could create huge amounts of work for very little information for anybody, let alone the individual. And to do it mandronically just strikes me as being, what's our risk tolerance as a council? And have we defined that in terms of what we did in here? Or are we just saying everything?
No, the last point about everything, you'll see I made a note in the implication section about the Constitution. It refers to any breaches.
Yeah. And that's why I picked it up, because for me, there's no proportionality at all involved in this. And maybe when we review the Constitution, that is a proportionality issue that's there based on a defined risk tolerance. Because, yes, as a line manager, you want to remind someone when they don't do a purchase order, but, how much time and effort has gone into mandronically reporting and all of those things. And I would like to see proportionality and the risk tolerance being reflected in this work.
Is there any qualification, serious breach, very serious breach, minor breach that is used?
Well, I can recall when Councillor Martin was here previously that we did have a conversation about what was major, what was minor.
And we tried to get it done then, and we didn't get that.
No, it is a tricky one. It is about narrative, but it's about having confidence in the systems. You heard from Scott earlier about what he goes and does, and it's challenging, etc. So significance will come through. The other thing about this, in the past, is that we've got to be sure that people are feeling confident, staff are feeling confident to report as well. Because this is what can be picked up, yes, but we want to have a culture of self-reporting too, because people are not perfect. Of course they're going to be mistakes, but then it comes back to tolerance. So we do acknowledge there must be some other things going on. We can't point to them. I can point to some in every committee, frankly, but what's that about? That's not helping the due process of local government. So we want to, as indicated, Katie, look at this issue of any breaches, and then just bear in mind though what comes through as significant. One case, fine, that's easy to pick up and deal with. But we've got to be aware of maybe 2 or 3 insignificant becoming actually slightly more. So there's a balancing act basically. I take the point.
Chair, I think also it comes down to some of the root causes of these issues, doesn't it? I think that's a real point. And going back to the objectives, I would have said based on how we've got it here this year, go into a level of detail of making sure we understand the clause. I think it's very much about control to make sure we're operating as we should do. And if anything becomes a frequent breach, then understand the root causes. Well, interestingly, I like the SNI example. What we did was, of course, we had the problem, and we realised it wasn't as significant as being a breach might suggest, and we basically changed the rules. So this might actually be a solution, which might actually benefit us more so than actually simply saying you mustn't do it.
Well, I think that we need to rely on the monitoring officer's judgment as to what's significant, what isn't, and what we need to know as members, as opposed to what we have the day-to-day stuff that kind of goes on, which is not really particularly relevant to them whatsoever.
And Chairman, you will have others.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, Chair, also, if you look at internal audit work and reporting items to this committee, when you bring the significant issues to this committee, it's of concern to you. Whereas I'm duty bound during our internal audits to report any breach to the monitoring officer and the chief financial officer. So I do that, but the severity of that breach is can be in many occasions very minor.
Yes, so I mean the benefit of an environment where all breaches are reported, i.e. where the person doing the reporting does not have to make a judgment call whether this is a serious breach or a trivial breach or whatever, because that judgment call could be bizarre. He doesn't have to make a judgment call. All breaches are recorded. Your judgment call is to whether it's significant to bring to our attention. And that's how it works at the moment. So in some ways, we're reasonably satisfied with that operation, and if it's not occasioning too much pressure of work in the recording process. I mean, that's your point.
No, it's not. No. I think the point that Simon's making is the rules say all breaches have to be reported.
To officers?
No, to us. And that's the point I was making about causality and...
Simon here's what we're saying. So, off constitution, if you like, off record, we don't really need that.
But therefore we need to change the constitution. Therefore our recommendation back to the officers should be to bring forward a proposal to the constitution in the next round to amend it to proportionate, significant, whatever terms they wish to use. That's in line with what we do on board.
We'll leave that in the air for Simon to think about.
I would be constrained.
Chair, can I raise one, please? I think this might be accommodated later on when we talk about training needs and so on, committee development needs, but this is a classic development need potentially for the committee, because I think if you don't necessarily understand the language of auditing and controls, etc., and risk and all the rest of it, then it might be quite hard to penetrate this kind of discussion and meaningful thinking. So maybe this is the sort of thing we need to focus on. Maybe even a workshop for our training needs on the implications of breaches and what might constitute critical or major issues and so on. Again, we can talk about that later, but it's an opportunity to think about it.
Okay, any other questions on this? And can we resolve advice to note the report and to endorse the issue of reminders within the EDC about compliance with the rules and regs? Agree? Great. Thank you. Council for arrangements number 9. This is who's discussing this yours?
It is me, Chairman.
Tony, yeah.
Okay, if I can just draw members to attention to one amendment to the resolution resolved item 2. There's a typo there. The final word should be endorsed as opposed to amended. If you could note that, please. And also, I need to apologise for the late distribution of the appendices to go with this paper. There are two appendices. Appendix 1, which is the review of BBC counter-fraud arrangements, and Appendix 2, which is the transparency code. So hopefully members have sight of those. Okay, turning to the report itself. Committee, certainly those members who were on this committee last year and earlier will recall having seen the anti-fraud, bribery, corruption policy, response plan, confidential reporting policy and annual money laundering policy as those were developed before they were adopted by Council in February 14. So a new suite of policies were adopted. What this report is doing is giving members an update of how that policy has been applied and any activity during the course of 14-15, together with the direction we're moving in looking at counter-fraud arrangements. This committee has responsibility for the overview of the policy, so the anti-fraud, bribery and corruption arrangements, and within the policy I have a responsibility to report to make an annual report to you to assist you with that. Section 4 talks about the counter-fraud arrangements, as I just mentioned. The policies were introduced in February 14, and we sought to build on those policies and the work we're doing on counter-fraud. A business case for additional resource within the internal audit team to deal with counter-fraud work was approved in November 14, and the officer was taken and posted March 15. I think members will perhaps recall some of the issues with Scott delivering his audit plan by having staff diverted off to do investigative work. So this will help with a specific resource to deal with that and take some pressure off the general audit work in that respect. 4.2 tells us about fraud investigation during 14-15. The Monitoring Officer commissioned, another typo there should be 2014-15. The Monitoring Officer commissioned 5 investigations as set out there. Evidence of fraud was found in each of the first 4 cases. I must say that the 3 of the cases were interlinked, just to perhaps give some scale to what's been going on. And disciplinary action was made, disciplinary recommendations were made, and a disciplinary hearing was held in respect of the 3 interlinked cases. The 4th case was dealt with informal action under the Council's disciplinary procedure. And the 5th case, although it's been identified and the Monitoring Officer has commissioned an investigation, the chances of finding evidence of corruption are considered to be low, that it's not being considered a priority at this stage to pursue that investigation. However, the investigation work will be carried out in due course. 4.3 talks about fraud indicators, and if we call back to the information report, talked about local government transparency code. There are some specific sets of fraud indicators which were set out in Appendix 2, and just to note that we are compliant with producing that information data set. There are 2 sets or 2 levels of information required. One is required, one is recommended. We are able to report on all the required information and most of the recommended, and have changed our data collection methods so that we can comply with the recommended, missing recommended information sources during the course of the year. On to page 41, which talks about the anti-fraud, bribery, corruption policy response plan. There is a response plan attached to the policy which sets out how an investigation will be responded to and how that will be carried out. Given the complexities of the three issues that were mentioned earlier that were interlinked, we have had a wash-up, essentially, and lessons learned around how we might use the response plan going forward. And whilst there are a list of issues that have been identified, they are really improvements to the practice to enable us to deal with cases perhaps in better ways as we go forward. Going on to the conclusion, the anti-fraud, bribery and corruption policy response plan have been applied and have been tested during 14-15. They proved to be effective and some minor amendments have been identified. The policy and response plan provide council with clear systems and procedures to assist the effective prevention, prevention and investigation of fraud, bribery and corruption. Accordingly, the committee are invited to resolve that a proactive approach to counter-fraud be endorsed and that amendments to the anti-fraud, bribery and corruption response plan be endorsed. Thank you, Chairman.
Can I add one thing on that? Respect to investigations, which we appreciate, I'm not going to go into detail on, but we did inform the police, and they came and had a look at what we were doing, what the investigators were doing, and internal audit in particular were involved. And I want to just share with you their endorsement. I didn't put it in the report, but I think it's wise to bring it out. Their endorsement of the approach being taken and the thoroughness of the investigators. The reason I highlight it is because it's useful what you've been hearing about annual audit review, the audits going on, whether we're challenging enough, etc. I think that's a good external endorsement which you can add along to the external audit recognition of internal audit performing the roles they should. So I think I just add that into the general equation of how corporate governance is approaching this case. You've got someone outside saying, yes, good investigation work, good challenging work, and yet came to the right conclusions.
And these investigations complete?
Yes, the ones I'm referring to are complete. The ones
and did the police take any action?
There's some other action that's been contemplated, and that's as far as I'm going to go. But as far as this council is concerned, we've dealt with our case. The employee concerned is no longer with us, to use the phrase used earlier, and that is therefore the end of our involvement.
Yes.
We believe at this time that there could be some call upon us in other places.
Thank you. Yep.
It says there on page 42 that a response plan and accompanying flow diagram. Is this something we could have a look at in due course? The flow diagram would have explained to us. I think it would be a very powerful way to understand the progress, perhaps in shootings.
In terms, just to explain, response plan is a lot of words, which are very good, and it didn't prove very effective. A lot of words, and it's always easy to have a flow diagram to follow when you're involved in it. That's so that's a learning point from my perspective. So yes, happy to share.
Thank you. Can we resolve that proactive approach to counter-fraud be endorsed as a minimum the council's anti-fraud, bribery and corruption response plan as per the report be endorsed? Thank you very much. Annual governance statement, annual formality to approve this statement, which has already been signed off by the Chief Exec and the leader. Who's introducing this?
That's me again, Chairman. Yes, as you mentioned, it is an annual requirement of the committee to review the annual governance statement. And the annual governance statement itself is set out in the template as proposed by the CIFA. It picks up on lots of work that we do throughout the year, and much of that you've heard about earlier on in the meeting. And in particular, some of the work we do around the local code of corporate governance. Just take you to the annual government statement itself, start on page 47. The first section talks about the scope of responsibility of the council, and second, the purpose of the government's framework. Section 3 talks about the local framework for this council and identifies the key documents and key groups who are part of that governance framework. Also talks about the public sector internal audit standards, as was referred about earlier. Section 4 deals with a review of effectiveness, and that there is a requirement that we at least annually review the effectiveness of the framework. And that again picks on a number of pieces of work. And again, we've heard of some of those and much of the content earlier on this evening. And those are the key parts of that are set out in the bullet points on starting on page 50 and running through to page 51. Section 5 highlights the progress on the governance issues identified in our 13-14 annual government statement. And again, we've touched on some of these, certainly information security, ICT project management, and business continuity, and in fact the public sector internal audit standards were all featured in the Scots report earlier on. And section 6 talks about significant governance issues. The group of officers that deal with the review of the local code of governance have some difficulty with the wording of this, of these being significant. However, it is the language that's used in the template, and therefore we report on that basis. But what we have identified during the course of the year is some further work on counter-fraud, and the 2 bullet points on the top of page 52 identify those governance issues that we will be acting on this year, amongst a whole host of other things, and you would expect to receive a report on those in the same way as we've reported last year's section 5 report. That essentially is the government statement. As you can see, it's been signed off by the Chief Executive and Leader, but you are asked to approve this to be included within the published statement of accounts.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Nick.
Simon has already said this before, but this is designed for the public, this document. Can we think about use of mnemonics and use them for the first time and explain what they are, and then be consistent in their use throughout the document? Who outside of this room would know what SIPFA stroke solace was? If you remember the public, you probably won't. And then on page 4, penultimate paragraph, we use in full Chief Financial Officer, and yet we've used the CFO mnemonics above it. I know you've heard me bang on about it before, but it would be nice if we were consistent and we had some standard stuff. Thanks.
Even members look into that data.
Yeah, but this is for the public, it's not even for us, this is an external document.
Yeah, okay.
Other than that,
usual convention of in full in the mnemonics and practice. I'm sure. Okay, but that's heard, I'm sure.
Absolutely right.
Okay, so we can resolve, as we are requested, that member we approve the attached governance statement included within the published statement of accounts. Agreed? Thank you very much. Finally, the next part, we have my annual report. Taking any questions on that. Right, the good auditor that he is, the internal auditor has asked me to refer to the fact that one thing we have not done, which I will include, so I'm including a form of words along the following lines: only an informal assessment of the committee's effectiveness has been undertaken, this year, and a more formal assessment of the committee's effectiveness will be undertaken during 15-16. the effectiveness of the committee, Scott, remind us, it's a form of self-assessment.
Yes, it's within the terms of reference within the Constitution as well.
But it's essentially a form of self-assessment. There's no one else, and you don't.
No.
Auditors. No one else does.
Like a whole
Simon or...
There's a SIPFA standard checklist.
Yes. Yes, we've done it before. It's quite painless. But it's going to be more painful.
Chair, when we say there's a self-assessment, so it's not independent. So who can we nominate to undertake that process? I mean, do we sit here around and score ourselves? What do you think? Well, I mean, there's an ironic thing there, isn't there? Could you set the elsewhere for review, for instance, on the basis of like scrutiny, for instance? Or is that just get too complicated?
Does it go to members or just me? I mean, does it go to members of the committee or just me, the self-assessment questionnaire?
It's included in the
in the past, have I done it alone? Have I done it alone in the past?
Question. You have done it with the help of officers completed the
Yes,
self-assessment.
yes.
The results of the self-assessment get reported with the
Sure.
review effectiveness into
Would it be helpful if members shared the self-assessment challenge?
Yes,
we all assess ourselves.
Yes, Chair, is there a mandatory requirement to complete the self-assessment for effectiveness?
I think, Chairman, if I could just come in, it is within your terms of reference, so within the Constitution, within our rules, it is a requirement that the committee carries out a self-assessment.
Yes.
However, it could be done by an individual and then endorsed by the committee to achieve that.
Brought back to committee. Yeah. So, Chair, is it the case we have to assign something to do it, or we can assign you to do it, or we
Well, I prefer not to do it, obviously. I think it's been important, and indeed, you know, who better qualified than the chair of S&I?
I would treat it as a 360 appraisal. I get everybody to do it.
Yes.
And then have a coherent response that Scott can spend 2 minutes working out how much we've lied about it.
In that case, it goes on the agenda sometime. You do it in meeting?
I mean, it's included as part of the review of the effectiveness of internal audit.
Yeah.
It's an aspect of that which goes to the committee in September.
Yeah. Okay. So before then, we get a full questionnaire out to members, and we'll do it all separately.
Chair, can I make a recommendation? One of the things we did a couple of years back in S&I, which I found very effective, was we had some informal training sessions before meetings. Maybe, as again we're moving on to the development needs next, we could actually perhaps use that template, that checklist, as a pre-meeting exercise in order for us to think about what effectiveness means to us, and actually then complete it during that process, and then represent back to you at a subsequent meeting, potentially, or what have you. But I think it would be very good for us to understand, because a lot of terminology around this committee, and I don't think necessarily we all have a common meaning, a common understanding of what we mean, perhaps.
Chairman, if I may, I think what Councillor Morgan is saying is a good idea. Actually, I know from working with Councillor Morgan at S&I that it has proved effective there. However, timing will be an issue for you in order to get your assessment to feed into the annual assessment. We would need that to be included in a report which is presented to that committee. So I think the timing is against us. It would need to be a separate session sometime between now and the September Corporate Governance Committee.
Yes, because in that committee we are signing off the accounts which will incorporate all this as well. So this, unless there's a specific proposal to have a specific meeting separately out of committee for training purposes, for example.
So perhaps, Chair, you complete it on this occasion, but we consider that for future reference. It's potential training. I think they're pretty. I haven't seen the checklist clearly, but there may be some very illuminating questions on there that can perhaps give us food for thought about how we review our effectiveness.
I don't think they're that challenging. But yes, okay, so Well, let me consult with everybody anyway. We'll circulate within the next few weeks, we'll circulate the questionnaire. I'll take any responses from anybody on it, and I will then complete it, and again circulate it complete, and take any further comments, and then go to the September meeting. Right. Okay, so subject to that, you're happy with my report. Thank you. And item 12. We're scratch ahead of this agenda. What don't we know? We don't know what we don't know. Yes, go on.
Chair, well, I've obviously raised this view. There's probably a lot we don't know in that.
Well, there's a huge.
I think particularly with newer members, I think there's almost like a crash course in. For instance, we hear Scotland officers talk about audit plans and risk and so on. And, for those of us that have no knowledge of these subjects, how would one, for instance, go about completing an audit? What sort of things do you look for? And we hear terminology such as full or substantial. What do all these terms mean? What's the conceptual and intellectual basis for them? And really, I'd like to get to a kind of crash course on this, so we have a common understanding of the terminology we use in this meeting, particularly for those of us that don't perhaps have an audit background.
If I can interject, Chair, I agree. I agree with you, and that's something I do each year with new members that come onto the committee. I provide them with the internal audit charter, a bit of the governance framework for the authority and how this committee interacts with and on what feeds the agenda for the committee, and also then information on how the internal audit works and how external audit as well. Each time that goes out, I'm happy to, most of the time, the members are happy with the information they receive. On occasions, I give them the opportunity, and on occasions they take that up to have a one-to-one and meet the team. And I'm quite happy to cater for that. Some members are, depending on how long they've been in the authority, are comfortable with the process and the corporate governance. I take it as however they want to, and I'm happy to help with that on a one-to-one basis for sure. It's helped with previous members that have taken up that option.
Yes, and so Chair, so particularly thinking about the team effort. For instance, even what is an audit? What do you do on an audit? How do you find evidence, etc.? These kind of really basic fundamental aspects. You wouldn't necessarily expect those of us that have been on the committee side longer to not have knowledge of this, but perhaps new members might really have this training need.
Yeah. Traditionally, there's a sort of local government way of doing this, and there's a different way of doing this. And I wonder if I just float the different way of doing this for change. The local government way of doing this is right. We set up a training session. The training session has half a dozen topics: risk, audit, definitions, whatever you like. And one trundles through a presentation on those, and if one has managed to fit that in the diary, one comes. It's traditionally sort of 6 o'clock, hour and a half, something like that. An alternative way of doing it, which I float might be better, is Scott has got together the basic documentation required for a basic understanding of the committee and our work here, and that could form the basis of a one-to-one, which would also have opportunity to meet the team, so one can actually see the people doing the work, actually see what they're doing, ask what they're doing, whilst they're doing it. And that could be literally one-to-one. It could be the new members of the committee coordinating with Scott and having that sort of informal tutorial rather than a formal presentation. Now, there's two ideas. What do you think, guys?
I agree with the second option. I've done presentations before, early on in the Corporate Governance Committee we set up, and certainly those slides are provided as part of that information that I give to new members. But to describe what an audit is, it's almost easier to see it on the ground, speak to the people, see that within reason, see the files and how that sort of is developed and how that audit works, and interject with the auditors as well. It takes an hour's session, and we're quite happy to do that. And we now also incorporate in the corporate fraud officer as well, so there's another aspect to that as well. So that does work well.
Yeah, I mean, we've got eight members of the committee. I mean, if we split that in half and have sort of 2 sets of 4, I mean, is 4 too many, or?
It depends on the interest of the member, whether they're actually interested in finding more out about it.
I was thinking it was open 2 hours, or open day, 2 hours. Just to...
Chair, I'm thinking of a workshop. I mean,
you want to have a chat?
Yeah, basically, what is the definition of an audit? Now, maybe Scott and I could have a conversation about this. I'm going to be doing an audit in 2 weeks' time. I'm going to audit tea plantations in China. Is that the same as auditing the DDC on finances? I'm sure it probably isn't quite the same. But again, we'll probably have common conversations about this. So I think you have to understand that within our environment is looking at this kind of common situation. And really taking it basic, do we all have the same appreciation of what risk is, how you come at risk, all these things that we talk about. So I would say it's almost like a crash course in corporate governance.
May I come with you? I was going to say.
If it's anything like the trip to India I've just had, you probably wouldn't want to.
Can I just say, no one has an interest in internal audit unless you're really sad.
You know, Scott, would you like to think about that and maybe suggest a open afternoon?
Yeah, I'll get some thoughts and see how it might be best delivered. Yeah.
Yes.
I guess I'm really something because I find your reports quite interesting. Or some of
Well, as Vice Chair, we've had a discussion before you received.
Okay, should we leave it at that? See what Scott comes up with. Hopefully do something before the next meeting. Thank you very much.
Yeah.